let's go ahead and move on so that I can cover the material creations and all of that. So right now I'm going to press Alt and Q. Alt and Q is kind of like solo mode in ZBrush, and it basically isolates the texture set or the subtool. So I just want to make sure that I'm in the head. And I'm going to start building a complex material in Painter. So by the way, in the texture set settings, you see I have my resolution size that we set up in the baking process, and we have all the nice maps. The only one that we don't really need is the ID map. I can delete that. That is because there's no ID map really. An ID map is just like you can have like these bright colors to help you define masking portions, but yeah, we don't have one, so there's no need to worry about that. And I'm going to start building these from scratch. Okay, so here's another point in time that I like to always have my references to be able to keep an eye on the details and the intricacies of the materials and the textures, because when it comes to the texturing process, it's just about the subtleties. So you can have a character that is completely blue. You know, if you look at this, you say, okay, it's going to be entire blue character, right? But if you look closely, there's so many variations in roughness, in slightly hue, some spots in here and there that makes that blue, apparently just blue character, really, really interesting and complex. So if you just drag a blue layer into this character, it's not going to look like this, right? At all. Even though we have the nice texture, the nice details and all of that from Painter, from ZBrush, but there's a lot of subtleties, variations in roughness. Maybe this is not. You see, there's like a lighter blue gradient, but here it's also darker. There's almost like a purple inside here. There's not fully black. The transition in here, so it's really interesting. And this is something that I also enjoyed quite a bit. It's just to analyzing and breaking down what the textures or the materials of something would look like, and how can I recreate that in my creatures, even if it is a completely different material, or even if it's a completely different color, for example, right? I'll cover that in just a second, but just so you know, I have my references here, and this is something that I like to that keep an eye constantly. By the way, I also have this is something that I collected, the inside of a mouth of a camel. It's pretty weird and disgusting. So that's kind of like what I did here, or what I wanted to recreate in here. All right, and another thing, I want to show you this bit. It's a microscope, a USB microscope. You can get it for like $20 on eBay or Amazon. It's like really, really cheap, and it just connects to USB. So it is really cool because you can essentially plug it into your computer, into a USB. I might be able to just show you quickly. So I'm going to show you, I have like this leather mat on my desk that it's just like a blue leather. So I'm going to point it in here, and then I'm just going to try to get it in focus. I mean, the resolution is not great, but it just gives me an idea of like the pattern. So these are like the tiny little bits of, it's not a great example, but let's do it with this timber of my desk. You can see all the fibers inside the timber. Maybe this is like too close, but I can see all the subtle variations. Like, it's not just lines that are dark. There's a bunch of interconnected tiny things that you might not even see, but understanding how the material works, it gives you the basis of, ideas to create a material that is a lot more complex and a lot more realistic than, oh yeah, it's just a texture. Just a wooden texture, and you have like a bunch of different things. Let's see. Oh, with maybe here's my hand. It's probably a good one. Look at that. This is just the palm of my hand, right? And I don't know what that is. I promise it's a clean hand, but I have like a bunch of dots maybe on the other side. This is a close up to the skin pattern, right? So anyway, I just waste, to be honest, I just waste a lot of time doing this, because for me, it's just like incredible, all these intricacies of building materials and textures, and it's just a lot of fun, right? So that's why, like, you can do the same thing with AI, but there's no fun on that, and then you won't get all those little subtleties that make it so nice. Alrighty, so what I'm gonna do is based on all this rant of what I just show you about the subtleties of materials and how I think about it, you can totally use materials that come with Painter, something that you have downloaded. You can just drag and drop it. And I usually do that. If there is something, for example, I have like a cucumber, this one that I downloaded, is cucumber skin. So I can drag and drop it, and we go to the properties, and we can go to triplanar, change the tiling a little bit. And it's a little bit too strong. So I can go to the hide channel. Don't worry, I'll cover this in just a second, but I want to show you that you can definitely start with a material that comes with Painter, right? And you can change it maybe for like a more of a chicken skin. And just like that, we have something pretty cool, pretty decent, that gives us a bunch of extra details. You see on, off. So it's adding some subtleties as well. So this could be an excellent base to then create stuff. But that's kind of like the easiest thing. If you find some materials that you like and you think they are in line with what you're doing, by all means. It's more about knowing how to tweak the assets that you download, right? So in this case, I just downloaded this cucumber skin, which is meant to be for a cucumber, but you can tweak it a little bit. The size of the details, the thickness, the height map, all of that, and the color to create the basis for a different material. So I just wanted to cover that because this is something that in general I use, but for this workshop we're going to build it from scratch. So to start building the material, I'm going to give you the workflow, the general workflow of how I build any complex material, anything at all in terms of the textures. So the first thing is create a fill layer. And let's set this back to the base color. So I'm going to click on this icon. I'm going to assume that most of you guys are familiar with Painter, but if I click somewhere that is like, hang on, how did you do that? Feel free to interrupt me. So I'm going to click on the fill layer. I'm going to delete the one below. So now a fill layer is made out of these 5 channels. These are the default channels. So we have color, metal, roughness, normal, and height, and those are in here. So what I like to do is I like to make sure that I have the color and the rough only for the base layer. And that gives me access to the color and roughness, obviously. So I'm going to start, I want to try to recreate that sort of blue patterns, or not the pattern, but like the bluish tones of the cassowary, and see how that works. So I'm going to select oh, by the way, you can also click on the eyedropper and then select from this window. So that's pretty handy. I didn't know. I mean, I don't know if you knew that tip, but it's a cool way of selecting colors straight from the reference image. And then the roughness, I have it here because that way I can control the base roughness. So I can make it sort of shiny, a little bit shiny. And then when I add another layer, I can just change the roughness and it will start to variate things. Okay, so this is the starting point. Now I'm going to create another layer. This new layer, I'm going to start dealing just with color. So one of the powerful things about Painter is that you can split the channel. So you can deal with roughness independently from the color. The same thing with the material, the metal, the same thing with the height. But I'm not going to worry about any of that. I'm just going to make sure that the basis or the albedo color has the subtleties that will make it into an interesting material. So I'm going to press the Alt key and click on color. So that's just a quick tip in 3D Painter to isolate just one of the channels. So Alt and click on the channel isolates the color. Now I want to change this to, let's say, a red, very bright color. Again, this is my general workflow. This is how I teach it in the extra mile as well. I like to have this bright color so that I can visualize and see when I do masking how it affects the layers underneath. So with this one, let's go ahead and click on a mask. I'm going to click on black mask. And now, because it is a black mask, it's hiding that red color. Just like in Photoshop, you can press Shift and click on the mask to isolate it or hide it. So it's just a way of showing and remove the mask. If you press the Alt key, you can go into the mask. So you see it's just black. An alternative way of going into the mask is just from this dropdown. You can click on mask and you will see it. That is how it works. So by selecting the mask, make sure that this is kind of, if you're not familiar with Painter, this is kind of like an important thing. You see that there is like an outline around the mask. So if you click this, the outline is on the actual layer. If you click this, now we are tweaking or changing the mask itself. So with the mask selected, I'm going to click on this magic one, and I'm going to click on a fill or add a fill. So this by default adds this gray color. That's why you see it's a purple, because it's giving you half or 50% of the red as a mask, but you can just make it fully black or fully white, doesn't matter. I'm going to leave it as it is for now. So the idea with this fill is that we are filling that mask. I'm going to get into the mask. It is just gray. And I'm going to use a bunch of random grunge maps and things. You can paint your own maps, tileable textures, and bring them in as well. But I'm going to just go ahead and click on this icon of the libraries for the textures, and that filters all my textures. And I can go ahead and click on grunge. Grunge. There we go. So I'm going to look for something that has a bit of contrast, not too much. Let's try this grunge dirt dry. And I'm going to drag and drop it into the grayscale. So now this fill layer is going to be driven by these grunge maps. Now, if you remember what I said at the beginning, the importance of this whole workflow is that we're going to try to work with triplanar, because it's not very evident here, but where is it? Here. You see the line through, like this is the UV line. All of this is the UV line. So we need to make sure that even though it's not visible in this one, that it works for any project that we work in the past, because at the end, we're going to convert this into a smart material, which is really cool. So let's go ahead and click on triplanar. So now this image is going to be projected from all different angles, and you can play around with the tiling. So you can increase the size of this. I think what I had is perfect. You can play with the balance. You can play with the contrast. We're going to get back to this in just a second. But you have a few parameters and things that you can change based on which grunge maps or which black and white, let's say, image you bring in. Some of them don't have anything because they're like literally black and white images. If you create your own black and white tileable texture in Photoshop or whatever and bring it in, you won't have any parameters. It's going to be just a black and white image. But you can change the tiling and all of that. Okay, so I'm going to reduce the hardness as well. This is the triplanar hardness edges. And that's it. So I'm going to go back to the red layer, and you see what is happening. Okay, and this is the reason why I like to have the red color, so I can see exactly what is happening. So let's go ahead around this area. Go back to the mask now, select the grunge dirt, and I'm going to play with the balance. So I will be able to change the contrast to something that I like. This is very subjective, it's whatever you want. Just letting you know what I'm trying to do is generate a subtle variation between, like a nice mix between that blue and the red, right? Because there is not going to be red, it's going to be blue as well, but it's going to be very subtle. So I think this works nicely. I'm going to select the red color, and I'm going to go, actually, let's select a slightly different blue color from the reference. So I'm going to click on the eyedrop. I'm going to go for a darker blue. There we go. But then, of course, we can tweak it. So I'm just going to change it so it's not as saturated. Okay, that's it. So from afar, if you look at it, it's like, okay, this is just a blue character. But we're starting to get all those nice subtleties that I was talking about. Maybe push it more towards the greenish tones, make it lighter. Again, I do this a lot. And sometimes you don't even see those details, that difference. But when everything is at the end of the day, everything is put together, is going to matter. So it's important to go through all those subtleties. All right, let's go ahead and do another one. I'm going to click on a new layer, Alt, color, same thing. Could be any color really. I think red is fine for this. And I'm going to find another grunge map. Maybe this time something a bit more spotty. Let's try this grunge falls, or this fluff actually. Let's try this. I want to click and drag and put it straight into. So this is just like Adobe making things easier and life easier. So before I went ahead and create my black mask and then added my fill and all of that. But you can literally, once you have your layer, drag and drop it, and you see how as I drag, it creates that sort of mask for you. So you can just do that. And it will just create everything for you. So basically automates the process of creating a mask with a fill layer. So that's another tip for you if you want to optimize your workflow a bit. All right, so I'm going to take that grunge, make sure that it is triplanar again, very important. And I'm going to increase the tiling. So just to generate those light spots, maybe add a bit more contrast as well. Make them smaller. So I think that works. And again, select the color, bring in my preference. I'm going to go for a lighter color. But this is too light, so it's going to bring it down a bit. More saturated, perhaps. And this is why it's good to also work with references. You're trying to recreate those subtleties of the material. So overall, this is just a blue character, but there's so much richness in this already. I'm going to do this a couple more times, and you can build a complex material that has multiple layers. This is just the workflow that I want to, that I wanted to show you. I'll show you the one that I did for my creature here. See, all of these layers are essentially the same thing that I'm doing right now, that I'm building in a blue material with different subtleties. So one of them are spots, lighter spots, darker spots, veins, integration. I'll cover that in a second. Base variation. All of this is essentially what I'm trying to recreate here, what I'm trying to do. Okay, so let's do another one. So I'm going to do another layer, color. This time I'm just going to go for some larger spots like this one. Drop that in there. Make sure it's triplanar. Make it a bit smaller. All right, something like this. Now, this is just to introduce another tool that you have at your disposal, another thing that you can do to improve or make things a lot more complex, which are the blending modes. So I'm going to take this red and I'm going to set it to soft light, maybe. Just like in Photoshop, you can change things. And you see, it just makes it like a purpley color. Maybe overlay would give you more contrast, right? And then you can take the color and go back to your blues and try to find like a nice contrast. Again, keep things very subtle, but you see, I'm sort of like making things dirtier, but very subtle, okay? So it is just the same, like a color within the same hues, but I set it to overlay. And you can also use the opacity. So you see how this layer is changing things quite a bit. We reduce it a tiny bit. It's all about the subtleties. Alrighty. Another one that we can do is, let's click on a new layer, color, and I'm going to type veins or marble veins. That could be cool. And drop it into the mask. All right. Make sure that this is triplanar. Make this a bit smaller. Play with the balance and contrast. Let's concentrate here because this is a good place to show you what this is going to look like. All right, so this is another part of the workflow. So far, we just created a simple fill layer with different masks, different black and white things that ultimately gives us all these cool effects. So now I'm going to introduce another level of control. So we've covered the fill layers and the blending modes, very basic stuff. But now you can add a stack of layers. So you can add a bunch of effects within the mask itself to make it more interesting. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to click, first I'm going to show you what this is going to do. So let's use a bright red color again in the layer. Let's get closer here. And this layer is going to add a little bit of variation in the height. So aside from the color, I'm going to click on height and I'm going to click on this slide. I'm going to push it. So you see, this is really, really strong. This is not something that I would do. Again, it's all about the subtleties. So I just want to show you that it is a bit noisy on the edges, but because I'm going to use this with a tiny bit of height, I'm going to push it just so that you can see it, but then I'm going to tone it down. The idea will be to edit this mask that is driven by these marble veins into something that looks more random and it's a bit more subtle. So that's how you can build complexity with the mask. So I'm going to press the Alt key to get into the mask. So this is exactly what these marble veins is giving me. What I'm going to do is click on the magic wand here, and I'm going to click on Add Filter. So this add filter is going to add an empty filter on top of the veins. So I can affect just this black and white image of the veins. So let's go ahead and click on this filter and type blur. I want to click on blur, and it just acts as the name says, it just blur things out. So I'm going to play around with this a bit. And then I'm going to add another effect. Let's click on filter, another filter. And this time I'm going to go for warp. Click on warp. And it just warps everything, but I can just change the intensity. I can change the subdivision of the warp so that it's not that big. So I just want to add a tiny bit of variation. You see, it's not too much. Okay. And I think that's fine. So if I go back, if I get out of the mask by clicking on the actual layer, you see that things are a bit smoother, right? And I can just go ahead and reduce the intensity now. So that is very subtle what it pushes out in terms of on the volumes. All right. So now I'm going to set this to another blue color from the reference. And for something like veins, for instance, you can use, instead of contrast pieces or contrast layers, or contrast blending modes, you can use something like lighter mode. So I can go for screen maybe, and maybe change the hue slightly. So it's going to make it a brighter pixels. Okay, so now if I turn this on and off, again, it's pretty subtle. So this is kind of like the most, I'd say one of the most important things about this texturing process. You look at this and you say, okay, this is just a blue material or a blue thing. But if I press C on my keyboard, which is the C for cycle through the different channels, or not C for cycles, I think it's C for channels. So you can cycle through the channels. But I'm going to stop at the base color. So this is what we've been actually editing, the albedo color. And you see how complex things look in just one blue color, right? So that is the idea, that you spend the time making things look very, very complex, even though it is just a single color, and it's all about the different subtleties of all these layers. And in all honesty, that's how I build very complex materials. I can do more layers, and then I can do groups of those layers. But this is the workflow, just very simple colors with mask. That's it. Let's go back with material, pressing the letter M. And let's go ahead and create maybe a slightly different material that has some subtle variations to what we did. So I'm going to go ahead and click, holding Shift to select everything, Control G, and that will group everything. I'm going to double click this and call it blue base creature. Okay, so that's just a folder that has all of those things. Now I'm going to do another material that is going to be mainly for perhaps the red areas, for example, like this. And you see, it's slightly different. It's a bit more shiny. It's very similar actually, but it's a bit more shiny, I think. Right. So I'm going to try to recreate something like that. And at the end of the day, it's just, I'm making up the creature, so I will be able to come up with something. And I want to show you how to play with more height details in Painter.